بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وهو المستفيض على رأي جماعة من أئمة الفقهاء، سمي بذلك لانتشاره من فاض الماء يفيض فيضا. ومنهم من غاير بين المستفيض والمشهور بأن المستفيض يكون في ابتدائه وانتهائه سواء، والمشهور أعم من ذلك. ومنهم من غاير على كيفية أخرى وليس من مباحث هذا الفن. ثم المشهور يطلق على ما حرر هنا وعلى ما اشتهر على الألسنة، فيشمل ما له إسناد واحد فصاعدا، بل ما لا يوجد له إسناد أصلا. Continuing with the discussion of mashhur, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he brings in another word, and that is mustafīdh, because some scholars assumed that mustafīdh and mashhur are both the same thing. So he says, وَهُوَ الْمُسْتَفِيضُ عَلَى رَأْيِ جَمَاعَةٍ مِّنْ أَئِمَّةِ الْفُقَهَاءِ. That mashhur is also called mustafīdh, but this is not according to everybody. So he says, عَلَى رَأْيِ جَمَاعَةٍ مِّنْ أَئِمَّةِ الْفُقَهَاءِ. This is the opinion of a group from the imams of the jurists, the imams of the fuqaha. So firstly, looking at the wording that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah used, here he is once again criticized for the way that he combines Nuzha an-Naḍar with Nukhbatul Fikr. You can see that the word Ra'yin is from Nukhbatul Fikr, isn't it? And Jama'a is from Nuzha an-Naḍar. Yet Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah made this word of Nukhba, Ra'i, he made it mudaf to the word Jama'a. So he is connecting a word of a totally different book, and that was actually written a few years earlier. He's connecting the words of that book with a book that was written later, and it also alters the i'rab. So therefore, Kamal ibn Abi Sharif rahimahullah, he criticizes Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah for combining the two books like this here, and he says, لا يخفى مخالفة نظم المتن لتنوين رأي فيه وسقوط التنوين للإضافة في عبارة الشارح. That in the original text in Nukhbatul Fikr, the word Ra'i, it had a tanween, it was Ra'yin. So وَهُوَ الْمُسْتَفِيضُ عَلَى رَأْيٍ, according to one opinion. However, because he is combining it like this here, he's making it a mudaf, and a mudaf does not have a tanween, so the tanween will fall away. So Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah, he also pointed this out, and he says, لفظة الرأي في المتن منون وفي الشرح مضاف وهو غير مستحسن في المسجد. That the word رأي in the original text in Nukhbatul Fikr, it was with a tanween, but in the commentary now it no more has a tanween because it was made mudaf. So he says وهو غير مستحسن في المسجد, that this is not the commendable way, it's not the ideal way of mixing the two texts like this. But then he gives an excuse for Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, and he says, لكن لما كان الكتابان بمنزلة واحدة ساغ. Because Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he combined the two books in such a way that they become one book, so therefore it was permissible for him to do this. But then he says, وَمَعَ هَذَا كَانَ الْأَوْلَى أَن يَقُولَ لِجَمَاعَةٍ. In spite of this, it would Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah could have averted this unwarranted criticism if he had to simply say لِجَمَاعَةٍ. In that case, the word رَأْيٍ would have still had its tanween, عَلَى رَأْيٍ لِجَمَاعَةٍ. Now looking at this word mustafīdh, so Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says that according to some scholars, the words mashhur and mustafīdh have the same meaning. So he mentions that it's a group of the imams of the fuqaha, so not just any faqih, rather those who were the imams. According to them, the word mustafīdh is a synonym with the word mashhur. So to quote some fuqaha, Alama Amidi rahimahullah, for example, he wrote, فإن نقله جماعة تزيد على الثلاثة والأربعة سمي مستفيضا مشهورا. That if a group of more than 3 or 4 have to narrate a report, then it will be called mustafīdh and mashhur. So you can see, it just like how it can be called mashhur, it can also be called mustafīdh. From amongst the Hanafis, Alama ibn al-Hummam rahimahullah, he said, وَمِنْهُ قِسْمٌ يُسَمَّى الْمُسْتَفِيض مَا رَوَاهُ ثَلَاثَةٌ فَصَاعِدًا أَوْ مَا زَادَ عَلَيْهَا. that from amongst them there is a group that is called Mustafīdh. And what is Mustafīdh? It is what three or more have narrated. So he's trying to show that Mustafīdh corresponds with the definition of the Muhaddithin of Mashhur. And then after that he will explain the Hanafi definition. But now this definition of Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah, and also the definition that Allama Amidi rahimahullah gave, it's the same as the definition of Tawatur, isn't it? Because they don't add any clause to differentiate Mutawatir from the definition. And you know, a definition has to be jami' and mani. It has to be comprehensive, and it also has to exclude whatever is not part of the definition. So Allama Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah, he's simply saying ma rawahu thalathatun fasa'idan aw ma zada alayha. So this has the scope of also including and encompassing mutawatir if the other conditions of tawatur are fulfilled. Because if 1 million people from different backgrounds and different parts of the world with different objectives, if all of them have to quote something which they heard or saw, then it comes under this broad definition that Allama Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah has given. And therefore in the commentary, Allama Ibn Amir al-Hajj rahimahullah, he clarifies that the definition has to be qualified. He said, وَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ قَيْدٍ مَا لَمْ يَنْتَهِ إِلَى التَّوَاتُرِ, that it's necessary to restrict it, that as long as it does not reach tawatur. So this was Allama Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah. Long before him, Allama Sarakhsi rahimahullah, he also used both terms interchangeably in his usul. So he said, وَأَمَّا السُنَّةِ فَقَدْ جَاءَتْ مُسْتَفِيضَةً مَشْهُورَةً فِي ذَلِكَ. So here you can see that the sunnah, it has certainly come as mustafid and mashhur. So he's using both words interchangeably. Likewise, Allama Alauddin Bukhari rahimahullah, he said, وَيُسَمَّى هَذَا الْقِسْمِ مَشْهُورًا وَمُسْتَفِيضًا. So this type can be called mashhur and mustafid. So mashhur and mustafid is very clear from here. He mentions this in Kashful As-Surar in volume 2 on page 534. So these proofs show that many scholars, including Hanafi scholars, they use the words mashhur and mustafid interchangeably. Furthermore, some Hanafi scholars, they also use the word mustafid interchangeably with the word mutawatir. For example, Allama Jassas Razi rahimahullah, he quotes verse number 160 of Surah Nisa, فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُمْ, until the end of that ayah. And then he says, وَقَدْ وَرَدَ مِنْ طَرِيقِ النَّقْلِ الْمُسْتَفِيضِ وَالْخَبْرِ الْمُتَوَاتِرِ الَّذِي لَا يَتَطَرَّقُ إِلَيْهِ الْفَسَادُ وَالْبُطْلَانُ أَنَّ النَّبِيَّ صلى الله عليه وسلم قد كان يصلي إلى بيت المقدس إلى أن نسخ الله تعالى الصلاة إلى تلك الجهة. So you can see here he's using the word mustafid and the word mutawatir interchangeably. Likewise, Allama Badruddin Aini rahimahullah, he also mentioned in Al-Binaya in volume 1 on page 156, أما فعلا فهو ما ثبت بالنقل المستفيض والنصوص المتواترة. So you can see نقل المستفيض والنصوص المتواترة أنه عليه السلام غسل رجليه في الغسل ولم تختلف الأمة فيه. But using mustafid interchangeably with the word mutawatir was not only limited to the Hanafis. So scholars of the other madhahib, they also use the word mustafid in the meaning of mutawatir. For example, Allama Zarkashi rahimahullah, he wrote in Al-Bahr al-Muhit fi Usul al-Fiqh in volume 3 on page 312, Faslun fil Mustafīdh. This here is the chapter of Mustafīdh. تعريف المستفيض والفرق بينه وبين المتواتر. But then he says قيل إنه والمتواتر بمعنى واحد وهو الذي جرى عليه أبو بكر الصيرفي والقفال الشاشي. So you can see that these scholars, they had the same view that mustafid and mutawatir are the same. So in short, the fuqaha use the word mustafid interchangeably with the words mashhur and interchangeably with the words mutawatir. So when reading the books on fiqh and you see the word mustafid, then you should remember that it could either be referring to mashhur, the definition that we done here of mashhur, or it could also be referring to mutawatir. Now, although Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, yeah, he only made reference to the fuqaha, he restricted it to the imams of the fuqaha. Allama Munawi rahimahullah, he quotes from Allama Sakhawi rahimahullah that there were some usuliyin and also some muhaddithin who also had the same view. So Allama Munawi rahimahullah, he writes, وَكَذَلِكَ لِلْأُصُولِيِّينَ وَبَعْضِ الْمُحَدِّثِينَ كما عبر به السخاوي. He's saying that there were usuliyin and there were also some muhaddithin who also considered both words to be the same. That means mashhur and mustafīdh are the same. But then he clarifies and he says وَأَخْطَأَ مَنْ قَالَ كُلُّهُم, that there were some who said no, according to all the usuliyin, or they made this blanket statement according to all the muhaddithin, mustafīdh and mashhur is the same. So he said that those who said that it's refers to all, then they have definitely made a mistake. So to give some examples of muhaddithin who also use the word mustafīdh in the meaning of mashhur, Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he mentions in his Kitab al-Tamyiz, on page 19, فقد صح بهذه الروايات المشهورة المستفيضة في سجود رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم ذي اليدين أن زهره واهم في روايته. So you can see here he said بهذه الروايات المشهورة المستفيضة. It shows that both words were used interchangeably. Likewise, Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he also used mashhur in the meaning of mustafīdh. So he mentions in his Ma'rifa Ulum al-Ḥadīth, أما أمير المؤمنين علي رضي الله عنه فكان إذا فاته عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حديث ثم سمعه من غير, that Ali radiallahu anh, if he did not hear from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a narration, and if he had to hear it now from someone else, then he would make that person take an oath. And he says, وَالْحَدِيثُ فِي ذَلِكَ عَنْهُ مُسْتَفِيضٌ مَشْهُورٌ. This here is so popularly and commonly quoted from Ali radiallahu anhu. So, but the point which we're trying to show, mustafīdh and mashhur were used interchangeably. And then like we mentioned about the fuqaha, that the muhaddithin, they also use the word mustafīdh interchangeably with the word mutawatir. So in Arabic, the linguistic meaning of mustafīdh actually can incorporate both. It can incorporate the meaning of mashhur, and it can also incorporate the meaning of mutawatir, and we'll see this here in the text that's coming ahead. So the crux is that when reading the books of some muhaddithin and when reading the books of some fuqaha and usuliyin, then you will see that most of the time, sometimes the word mashhur is used in the meaning of mustafīdh, or mustafīdh is used in the meaning of mashhur, and at other times mustafīdh is also used in the meaning of mutawatir. So you should just keep this in mind when you are reading, because that's the whole objective and reason why we are learning all of these terminologies, to understand what the earlier scholars meant. Now, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he explains the linguistic meaning, and he says, why is it called mustafīdh? So he says, سُمِّيَ بِذَلِكَ لِانْتِشَارِهِ, or why will mashhur be called mustafīdh? It's because of how it is spread out. So it comes from the words فَاضَ الْمَاءُ يَفِيضُ فَيْضًا. So in Lisanul Arab, the word mustafīdh, it's explained as كثر حتى سال على ضفة الوادي وفاضت عينه تفيض فيضا إذا سالت. That when something increases until it flows, when water increases until it flows beyond the banks of the valley. Likewise, another context which is used, وفاضت عينه تفيض فيضا إذا سالت, that the eyes overflow with tears. So you can see that it has this meaning of overflowing. Likewise, Allama Ibn al-Athir rahimahullah in an-Nihaya fi Gharib al-Athar, he says, فَاضَ الْمَاءُ وَالدَّمْعُ وَغَيْرُهُمَا يَفِيضُ فَيْضًا إِذَا كَثُرَ. So water, or the water of the eyes, that means the tears, you will use the word فَاضَ, you will say فَاضَ الْمَاء or فَاضَ الدَّمْعُ when it إِذَا كَثُرَ, when it overflows, when it's a lot, when it's abundant. Now, after quoting from these two lexicographers, let us look at how the commentators of Hadith defined and explained the word mustafīdh. So, Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explains it as كثر حتى سال على طرف الوادي, that it increases, it overflows until it reaches, it overflows on the edge of the valley. And then he says, يفيض فيضا قال في شمس العلوم. So now he's quoting, أي زاد حتى خرج من جوانب الإناء, that it's overflowing until it comes out from the sides of the container. And he says, وفي التاج استفاض الخبر أي شاع واستفاض الوادي شجرا إذا اتسع وكثر شجره. So the spreading, you say استفاض الخبر when news spread, that means the rumor has spread. And likewise you also use it istafad al-wadi shajaran, that the valley has a lot of trees. So the common meaning that you may have noticed from all of this is that it has the meaning of abundance, of being a lot. So the abundance of narrators in mutawatir and mashhur is very clear, isn't it? So it can incorporate, you can say that there are so many narrators and therefore you're using the word Mustafīdh. It's just like how that container is actually overflowing. It's not just full to the brim, it's overflowing. So in the same way, there are so many narrators. So this is the one meaning. Then the word istifada is also used in the meaning of spread. So Allama Jawhari rahimahullah, he said, Fada al-khabru yafidu wastafada sha'a, that it means to spread. So وَهُوَ حَدِيثٌ مُسْتَفِيضٌ أي مُنْتَشَرٌ فِي النَّاسِ, that you will say that the statement is mustafid, is spread amongst the people. So just as you can use the word mustafid for a general statement that has spread amongst the people, you can also use it for a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that has now spread. In our context, we say that it has gone viral. So we can see that from a linguistic point, the word mustafid can accommodate both mashhur and mutawatir. So the first view is that mashhur and mustafid are synonyms. Then the author Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentions other views regarding the meaning of mustafid. So some of these views are isolated and they do not hold any merit, and some of them do not even apply to the science of ulum al-hadith. So he says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ غَيَرَ بَيْنَ الْمُسْتَفِيضِ وَالْمَشْهُورِ. From amongst them there are those who differentiated between mustafid and mashhur بأن المستفيض يكون في ابتدائه وانتهائه سواء, that mustafid is such that the beginning and the ending, that means the amount of narrators in this chain will be equal. And mashhur is more general than that. In different things you can have different amount of narrators. So the meaning of this text is straightforward, that some scholars, they differentiated between mustafid and mashhur by claiming that mustafid refers to those narrations where there is an exact amount of narrators from the beginning until the end. Now Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah said, فِي ابْتِدَائِهِ وَانْتِهَائِهِ سَوَاء, but this also refers to the links which are in between the beginning and the end. So Allama Qurani rahimahullah, he mentioned in his annotations, صَرَّحَ الْمُصَنِّفُ فِي تَقْرِيرِهِ بِأَنَّ الْمُرَادَ مَا بَيْنَهُمَا, that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, when he was teaching this here, then he clarified that it also refers to the links which are in between. And to substantiate this, Allama Sakhawi rahimahullah, he also quoted the same explanation from Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. He said, قال شيخنا, that our Shaykh Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he said, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ غَيَرَ بَيْنَهُمَا بِأَنَّ الْمُسْتَفِيضَ يكون في ابتدائه وانتهائه يعني وفي ما بينهما, that even in between. So to have a narration like this, where there is an exact number in each and every link, it's extremely difficult. Just try to imagine it, that you have a sanad, right? And there are two Sahaba who are narrating it. There are two companions quoting from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then, now to have an exact amount in every link, so there will have to be exactly one narrator from each of the two companions, so that you can have two narrators in the era of the Tabi'in. So if one Sahabi has two narrators who are narrating from him, then the other Sahabi cannot have any narrator who is narrating from him, otherwise it will not balance out. If you have two narrators quoting from the one Sahabi and one narrator quoting from the other Sahabi, then it becomes three, so now it's no more exact. So there will have to be two from one Sahabi and zero from the other, or one from one Sahabi and exactly one from the other. Then going to the next link, each of those two tabi'in, they will also have to have exactly one student who narrates from him, so that there can be only two narrators in the next link. And again, yeah, if any one of them has more than one narrating from him, then his contemporary cannot have any students. Otherwise, there will be more than two narrators. So can you see how difficult it becomes? Now, generally what happens is that the number of narrators increases in every subsequent link. So to have the same amount of narrators in the end as there was in the very beginning is really far-fetched. So there's probably no hadith that exists like this. So if there's no hadith that exists like this, then what is the use for making a terminology? So this shows that this view is weak. He then says, وَالْمَشْهُورُ أَعَمُّ مِنْ ذَلِكَ, that mashhur is more general than that. So in the footnote, Shaykh Nuruddin Itr, rahimahullah, he explains how mashhur is more general and more encompassing. So if you look at footnote number 4 on page 46, those of you who are using our prints, so he writes the definition of Mustafīdh just as I explained, and then he says ويشمل, speaking about مشهور, ويشمل ما ليس كذلك كالذي يكون أحاديا في أوله ثم ينقله عدد التواتر. So he's saying that mashhur, it also incorporates those narrations which in the very initial stages it had this, it was ahad, and thereafter lots and lots of people narrated it, so many people, like the amount of narrators needed for tawatur. So this here basically is the Hanafi definition of mashhur, and we'll discuss that inshallah. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he explains وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ غَايَرَ عَلَى كَيْفِيَّةٍ أُخْرَى, that there are those who differentiate even in another way. So for example, Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explains that these scholars, they regard Mustafīdh to be that which the entire ummah has accepted. So he says وَهِيَ أَنَّ الْمُسْتَفِيض مَا تَلَقَّتْهُ الْأُمَّةِ دُونَ اعْتِبَارِ عَدَدٍ, that they don't take into consideration how many people are actually transmitting the report. They look at how many people are accepting the what is intended from that report. Al-Mazarkashi rahimahullah, he mentioned in Bahr al-Muhit, وَقِيل بَلِ الْمُسْتَفِيض رُتْبَةٌ مُتَوَسِّطَةٌ بَيْنَ الْمُتَوَاتِرِ وَالْآحَادِ. So they are now creating a different category. And then he also mentions who held this view. He says وَنَقَلَهُ إِمَامُ الْحَرَمَيْنِ وَأَتْبَاعِهِ. He's saying that Imam al-Haramain al-Majuwayni rahmallah and his followers, they quoted from Abu Ishaq, and he says that his student also Abu Mansur, he also chose this view. And then there were others who also then used the word Mustafīdh in a whole lot of other ways, but all of these are not related to ulum al-hadith, so there's no need to dwell on them. وَلَيْسَ مِن مَبَاحِثِ هَذَا الْفَنِّ. Now the next paragraph, it deals with a completely different meaning of a mashhur. But there are two important things that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah ought to have mentioned here, but he did not mention. So inshallah we'll quickly go through them. So firstly, it's essential to note that there is no default status of mashhur. What does that mean? That if a narration is mashhur, it does not necessarily mean that the narration will be authentic. For mutawatir, what did we say? That every mutawatir narration, it's automatically authentic, isn't it? You don't even have to inspect the asanid, you don't even have to look at the narrators. However, a mashhur narration, it could be weak and it could even be fabricated. So that's the one important point to remember. Then the second point is that, remember, for who was Ibn Hajar rahimahullah writing this? You remember from the very beginning. He was writing it for the beginners, isn't it? So therefore, he should have given an example of mashhur. So he didn't give an example, and therefore we will have to present an example. So one example, and this example fits into our present day circumstances, because you know that there were over 500 known scholars who passed away over the last 12 months. So this narration is when the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمِ انْتِزَاعًا يَنْتَزِعُهُ مِنَ الْعِبَادِ إِلَى آخِرِ الْحَدِيثِ. So this narration, it's a famous narration. It's narrated via 5 companions, via 5 Sahaba. So Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah, they narrated it via Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu anhu. Imam Tahawi rahimahullah in his Mushkil al-Athar and Imam Abu Awana, they in his Mustakhraj, they narrated it from Aisha radiyallahu anha. In the Zawaid of Bazzar, Alama Bazzar rahimahullah narrated it from Ziyad ibn Labid. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah in his Musnad and Imam Tabarani rahimahullah and Ibn Majah rahimahullah, they narrated from Abu Umama al-Bahili. And in Ithaf al-Mahara, it's narrated from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh. So you can see there are 5 companions who are narrating it. So this here passes the condition in the first link that they need to be 3 or more. Now here, although some of the narration of these asanid are authentic, there are other asanid that are weak, but the narration will still be mashhur, because I just told you that it's not essential for a mashhur narration to be authentic. So a combination of weak chains can also lead to a narration becoming mashhur. So here if you have a mixture of authentic asanid and weak asanid, then definitely the narration becomes mashhur. So this example is made up of authentic chains and weak chains. Now looking at just the first Sahabi. So the first narration I quoted from Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, who said it's narrated by who? By Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu anh. So he had 3 students. So Urwa, and this narration comes in Bukhari and Muslim. Likewise Umar ibn al-Hakam, that Imam Muslim rahmallah then brings a chain which links to him. And then Khaythama, so this narration comes in Mu'jam al-Awsat of Imam Tabarani rahimahullah. So we can see that just from this one Sahabi, we already have 3 Tabi'in. So it already passes the condition within the link and the era of the Tabi'in. And then if you have to add the students of all the other Sahaba, we'll have so many more narrators in the era of the Tabi'in. But here for the purpose of this example, we don't even have to consider all of that. Then going one link lower, from the first student of Urwa, there were 4 students. So one was his son Hisham, then Abu al-Aswad al-Madani, likewise Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, he also narrated it from Urwa, and Imam Zuhri. So if you want to, you can make a table of this here. Inshallah, it will become very easy then for you to understand how in every link you are getting 3 or more narrators. Now again here, it's only one student we're quoting, isn't Urwa, and you can see there are 4 narrators. So this already puts it in the category of mashhur. And then again, if we add all the students of the others, then there will be so many more narrators in this link. Then moving to the next link, so from Hisham, there were more than 70 narrators. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he narrates a few. Just look at how he narrates so many tahwils. He says, حدثنا أبو الربيع العتكي قال حدثنا حماد يعني ابن زيد وحدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال أخبرنا عباد بن عباد وأبو معاوية وحدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة وزهير بن حرب قال حدثنا وكيع وحدثنا أبو كريب قال حدثنا ابن إدريس وأبو أسامة وابن نمير وعبده وحدثنا ابن أبي عمر قال حدثنا سفيان وحدثني محمد بن حاتم قال حدثنا يحيى بن سعيد وحدثني أبو بكر بن نافع قال حدثنا عمر بن علي وحدثنا عبد بن حميد قال حدثنا يزيد بن هارون قال أخبرنا شعبة بن الحجاج كلهم عن هشام بن عروة. So many students from Hisham that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is narrated in his Sahih. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentions about more than 70. He says, وَقَدْ اشْتَهَرَ هَذَا الْحَدِيث من رواية هشام بن عروة فوقع لنا من رواية أكثر من 70 نفسا عنه من أهل الحرمين والعراق والشام وخراسان ومصر وغيرها. So from all over different parts of the world, there were more than 70 people who quoted it from Hisham. So that's the example, which is the second point that I said that Ibn Hajar rahmallah should have added. One additional point that I should mention also at this stage, since all of you are Hanafis. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned that a person obtains ilm al-daruri from tawatur, and for mashhur he will get ilmun nadhari. So that's according to muhaddithin. And inshallah we'll discuss the Hanafi view. According to Hanafis, that you get ilmu daruri, you get ilmu daruri also from mashhur. So for the muhaddithin view, Alama Munawi rahimahullah, he quotes from Alama Alai rahimahullah, is saying وهذا القسم ملحق بالتواتر عند المحدثين يفيد العلم النظري إذا كانت طرقه متباينة سالمة من ضعف الرواه. And thereafter, so he says that that this category, it will be the same as mutawatir according to muhaddithin, that it gives you the faida of ilm, but the ilm will be nadhri, but you could get ilm yaqini and nadhri on condition that the chains are dassamala, they are secure from weak narrators. وَمِنَ الشُّذُوذِ وَالْعِلَّةِ. So for now we just translate these words shuzuz and illah as irregularity and a hidden defect. Inshallah we'll explain all of these in more detail on page 58, because it is there where Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah gives the definition of a sahih hadith, and then he mentions that sahih narration should not have any shuzuz, and it should not have any ilal in it. لكنه يفارق المتواتر في أنه يشترط عدالة نقلته. The difference between mashhur and mutawatir can be transmitted from any person, even if it's a fasiq, and like we said, even if it's a kafir. However, for mashhur it is conditional that the narrators have to be عادل. فإن المشهور قد يكون أحادي الأصل ثم يشتهر بعد الصحابة في القرن الثاني فمن بعدهم. So from all these things that I explained, you can easily understand that it is necessary to inspect the narrators of the multiple chains of a narration that the muhaddithun would consider and define as mashhur. Now Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he highlights, so I know the time is up, but inshallah we can quickly just complete this here. So he mentions that the muhaddithin, they also use the word mashhur for a completely different meaning. So those of you who want to leave, you are most welcome to leave, and then inshallah you can catch up with the recording. It's just that since this here is related to the topic, it's no use now we talk a little for 5 minutes on the same topic in the next session, and thereafter we continue with the next topic. Let's rather conclude the entire discussion on this topic here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. So he's saying that the muhaddithin, they also use mashhur for a completely different meaning. He says ثم المشهور يطلق على ما حرر هنا, that it's mashhur is used in a meaning that we explained here. وعلى ما اشتهر على الألسنة, it's also used for those narrations which are popular on the tongues. That means you are taking the absolute literal meaning of mashhur. So he says فيشمل ما له إسناد واحد فصاعدا بل ما لا يوجد له إسناد أصلا. So the previous scholars, they very often they would use the word mashhur in the literal meaning, because what language they were talking? They were speaking in Arabic, isn't it? So when they wanted to say that a narration is popular, when a narration is famous, when a narration is commonly quoted, then they would use the word mashhur. So they would use it for commonly quoted statements that were attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now in this case, the narration can maybe also only have one narrator in a particular a link, or maybe just two narrators. Maybe it could not even have any narrator at all. So an example of this here, what comes to mind now, is that in his Risala ila Ahli Makkah, Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah, he says, وَالْأَحَادِيث التي وضعتها في كتاب السنن أكثرها مشاهير. That the ahadith which I have placed in my kitab al-Sunan, in Sunan Abu Dawud, most of them are mashhur. Now, this does not mean that the narrations of Sunan Abi Dawud all have a minimum, or he's saying that aktharuha, so most of the narrations have 3 chains. Rather, it means that he selected for his book narrations that were well known. So commenting on the statement of Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah, Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah, he writes in the footnotes, لا يريد بالمشاهير هنا المشهور المصطلح عليه بين المحدثين أو الأصوليين، بل المراد والله أعلم الأحاديث المشتهرة عند المحدثين الدائرة بين الأئمة الفقهاء وأصحاب الفتية والمعمول بها عند جميعهم أو بعضهم. So he does not mean here mashhur according to the terminology, according to the technical meaning given by the muhaddithin or the usuliyin. And what's the technical meaning? That there must be a minimum of 3 in every era. Rather what he means, and he says wallahu a'lam, is that the ahadith are well known in the circles of the muhaddithin and amongst the fuqaha and the muftis, والمعمول بها عند جميعهم أو بعضهم وإن كانت في نفسها أخبار أحد, even though they may have had just one narrator or 2 narrators in a particular link. Now, Sheikh Nuruddin Itr, he explains how a person would obtain and some narrations are mashhur according to only one segment of people. So according to a specific group of people in those circles, the narration is mashhur. So if you look at the second footnote, if you're using the same print as me, on page 47, he writes, ومن هذا القسم المشهور على ألسنة العوام, that sometimes the narration will be mashhur and popular amongst everybody, amongst the masses. والمشهور عند النحويين, sometimes a narration will be popular only amongst the scholars of nahw. والمشهور عند الفقهاء, at times it will be mashhur according to the fuqaha. So like this here, it's mashhur only amongst a dedicated segment, a particular group of people. والمشهور عند الأدباء. So the important point is that the word al-sunnah can refer to the tongue of general people as well. So that makes you understand that a statement can be absolutely baseless and yet it will be termed as mashhur. So any common or popular narration that is quoted amongst the masses and attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it can be called mashhur, even though it is not proven that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said it. You can't find no sanad to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but because it's commonly being quoted and it's being attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would use the word mashhur. So this is why Ibn Hajar rahimahullah said, bal ma la yujad lahu isnadun aslan. Now, with regards to a few examples like this, so Allama Sakhawi rahimahullah, he presented few examples. For example, ulama'u ummati ka anbiya bani Israel, the scholars of my ummah are like the anbiya of the Bani Israel. So this is a fabricated report, yet it became so popular. So just because it became popular, it does not mean that it now is authentic or you can attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are many other examples like this. So I'll just tell you some books which mention about fabricated narrations, and then you can, if you want to, you can go see in those books. So there are so many dedicated books which were written concerning fabricated narrations. So to mention some random books, the one is كشف الخفاء ومزول الإلباس عما اشتهر من الأحاديث على ألسنة الناس by Imam Ismail الجلوني. Then you have المصنوع في معرفة الموضوع by ملا القاري. المقاصر الحسنة في بيان كثير من الأحاديث المشتهرة على الألسنة by الإمام السخاوي رحمه الله. So these are 3 books that I really recommend that you should try your best to read, inshallah, cover to cover. Because you know, when people know that you are specializing in hadith, then they are going to refer to you whenever they need to know the status of a narration. So these narrations that are so commonly quoted and oft repeated, at least if you know the status, then you will be able to respond to them. And then there are so many other books. You get Tadhkiratul Mawdu'at of Allama Maqdisi, الموضوعات من الأحاديث المرفوعات of Allama Juzqani, المنار المنيف of Ibn al-Qayyim, العالية المصنوعة في الأحاديث الموضوعة of Allama Suyuti, تنزيه الشريعة المرفوعة عن الشنيعة الموضوعة of Allama Kinani. So many books which are written, and even more books than that. And the benefit of reading these books is that you become acquainted with all of these fabricated narrations which people are attributing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then once you become acquainted with it, even if a person doesn't refer to you, sometimes you get a forward on WhatsApp or maybe something on social media, then at least you can notify the person that he is falsely attributing it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because what's the whole objective of doing this course? It's to preserve the authentic Aḥādīth and to protect the Aḥādīth from fabrications, isn't it? A point that comes to mind, sorry, like I said, those of you who want to leave, you are most welcome to leave. When I was mentioning about al-Masnu', so Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, he writes here in his commentary, وَقَرْ جَمَعْتُ غَالِبَهُ فِي جُزْءٍ مِمَّا اتَّفَقَ عَلَيْهِ الْحُفَّاظ عَلَى أَنَّهُ مَوْضُوعٌ أَوْ لَا أَصْلَ لَهُ وَمِنْهُ مَا اشْتَهَرَ عَلى أَلْسِنَةِ الْعُلَمَاء. That is saying that the Huffaz of Hadith, they have consensus that this here is a fabrication, yet that narration has become popular on the tongues of even ulama. So many times there will be ulama and pious individuals, like scholars who we hold in high esteem, they will quote fabricated narrations. So obviously we should still respect all our shuyukh, but we should also not falsely attribute anything to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whether it's our asatidha in madrasa, or our shuyukh in tasawwuf, or our elders in tabligh, no one has the right of quoting fabricated Aḥādīth and then attributing it to the Prophet ﷺ without clarifying that it is a fabrication. So we can't say my Ustad quoted it, even though I can't find the sanad, but because this great Shaykh quoted it, so therefore I'll also quote it in my bayans, or I'll also attribute it to the Prophet ﷺ. No, if there's no sanad for it, if you don't know the state and a fabrication, then you cannot attribute it to the Prophet ﷺ. Now this does not mean quote that narration again, and if we have the chance, or maybe depending what kind of relationship we have, then we should point it out with diplomacy. In Zafrul Amani on page 343, Mullah Abdullah Laknawi rahimahullah, he mentions an incident, and you should try to read it inshallah. The full discussion is also in Al-Athar al-Marfu'a fil Aḥādīth al-Mawdu'a. He mentions that Alama Marghinani rahimahullah and Alama Ghazali rahimahullah, they are from the senior scholars, but they were not qualified in hadith. So they quoted narration by simply following others. And sometimes what they quoted is baseless. Now imagine Alama Marghinani is such a great, is from the Mujtahideen fil Madhab. Likewise Imam Ghazali rahmallah, I don't have to tell you about his status. So Mullah Abdullah Laknawi rahmallah, he says, وَمِنَ الْمَعْلُومِ أَنَّ صَاحِبَ الْهِدَايَةِ وَغَيْرَهُ مِنْ أَكَابِرِ الْفُقَهَاءِ وَمُؤَلِّفَ إِحْيَاءِ الْعُلُومِ وغيره من أجلة العرفاء ليسوا من المحدثين ولا من المخرجين. That these great scholars, they are seniors from the fuqaha, or they are seniors from the ulama in tasawwuf, but ليسوا من المحدثين وإن كانوا في الفقه والتصوف وغيرهما من المكملين. Yes, they are perfect in the other sciences. فإن الله خلق عباده على أصناف متفرقة. So remember the principle, لكل فن رجال. So if you want to know anything about hadith, then who you should refer to? Refer to a muhaddith. So on the next page, Mullah Abdullah Laknawi rahimahullah, he writes, فَعُلِمَ بِالضَّرُورَةِ أَنَّهُمْ ذَكَرُوا مَا ذَكَرُوا اعْتِمَادًا عَلَى مَنْ قَبْلَهُمْ انقيادا لسلفهم ولم يزل هذا الانتظام في كتب الفروع والتصوف وغيرها خلفا عن سلف حتى انجر ذلك إلى إدراج ما لا أصل له وأدى ذلك إلى التلف. So to conclude, the muhaddithin, they use the word mashhur in the term mashhur in two meanings. The first, for a narration that has a minimum of 3 or 4 narrators, according to the differences which was explained earlier in every link, and then for popularly quoted narrations. Inshallah, we'll continue from here. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.